Hello, everyone. My name is Don, the movie reviewer, and today we're going to be talking about my top 10 favorite horror movies of all time. October is upon us, and October is my favorite month out of the entire year because it's fall. Fall is my favorite season out of the entire year. Wintertime, don't like it. Summertime's too hot, but positive weather, it's good. And spring, it's not bad, but nothing beats the fall with the leaves, with the fresh air, with the rain, with, just the overall vibe that you feel with this particular season, fall. It's just there's something about it that I can't quite put my finger on. It's just a really atmospheric type thing where it's just for me, I get so immersed with like just the season itself and like with all the activities because Halloween is in October and you get all the trick-or-treaters that come out and you get the corn maze and you get haunted houses and people dress up and you go to parties and it's just a really great time of the year and time of the month. It's the best and I absolutely love the fall. And also, what comes with the fall, October, and Halloween? Scary movies. That's what comes with it. And me, I'm a big horror movie junkie. Not as much as I used to be. A long time ago, I was a huge horror movie junkie. Like, I saw all of the Michael Myers Halloween movies. I saw some of the Jason movies. I'm more of a Michael Myers fan myself. Saw some of the Nightmare on Elm Street. So I was never like a big fan of the really heavy hitters, the heavyweights in the horror genre. But I loved horror movies in general. When I was a kid, I was just watching the slasher stuff like Scream, which revolutionized the slasher genre and turned it on its head, and you had a bunch of copycats that tried to imitate it, like this. And, especially with Halloween, they say before Halloween, no, Halloween didn't start the slasher trend. It was Black Christmas, so they say. And I saw Black Christmas, and Black Christmas was a very interesting movie. You can definitely see the similarities between that and Halloween. And then you fast forward a little bit into my adult years, and in my adult years, horror for me has declined tremendously with the really lackluster horror films we've been getting. It's really bad. But sort of, we've been getting a resurgence with horror movies. Like we have the new It movie that's out, which is doing very well. It's not like really scary or anything, but it's an entertaining, fun movie. I like the new It. We also had previously Don't Breathe, which was a very engaging, interesting movie. It had a technique and style of its own, and it was really effective. I didn't love it. I didn't think it was that good. I thought it was okay. It was an okay movie. I like Don't Breathe. But what we're seeing here is we're getting the resurgence of horror movies, and they're really starting to hit their stride again. And they're getting more audiences into the theater. When back then, people used to laugh at horror movies and say, this stuff is really dumb. But now, a lot of people are flocking to the theater to see horror movies. And so, without further ado, what I want to do is talk about my favorite horror movies. And I know a lot of people won't agree with this list, but this is my list. And these are movies that I feel that are either terrifying or they hold a place in my heart, or they're just really perfectly executed movies, and I think they're good. So let's get into it.
Dealing with demons is not my area. I'm very uncomfortable with it, and I'll tell you quite frankly, I sense that there's something going on in this house. You cannot run from this. It will follow you. It may lay dormant for years. Something may trigger it to become more active, and it will, over time, reach out to communicate with you.
Paranormal Activity. Yeah, I know. I absolutely love Paranormal Activity. The first Paranormal Activity, only the first one. Number two and all the other sequels, they all suck. All of the sequels suck. But the first one, to me, holds near and dear to my heart. It's a very good movie. I think it's perfectly executed. And you have a lot of people who want to complain about, oh yeah, there's nothing going on in here. You're just watching this couple in this house, and oh, string pulling on the door to make it close. Ooh, so scary. Well, okay, yeah, I can understand that for most people who say this movie's tedious and it's boring and it's not effective and it's just lazy and there's no script and it's just like Blair Witch Project. It's really stupid, it's slow, it's boring, all that stuff. I understand the criticisms. But for me, Blair Witch Project is what made me a found footage horror junkie. I don't like all the found footage movies. I think they're becoming oversaturated now. But with this, when the first Paranormal Activity came out, I enjoyed the tone of it. I enjoyed just the overall relationship between Mika and Katie. Um, I liked it. It had isolation in it. It's like you have this couple where they just moved in together. And you get to learn the relationship. Like Mika, he's a bit of a goofball, so I really don't understand why Katie's with this guy, but everyone likes somebody. And Katie, she's going to school. She's really laid back, and they're in this relationship, and they live in this very nice house in a suburban neighborhood, and they're getting terrorized by this demonic presence, and it's really about isolation with these two people because they're stuck in this house and they can't leave. Like in the movie, the guy explains that yes, you cannot leave. If you run, it will follow you. So you can't just say, "Ooh, get out of the house." That's not going to work in this case because when you listen to the backstory that she gives an explanation as to what's going on. So it's not just a random thing that's happening. And the house isn't haunted. It's Katie who's haunted. And we don't know why. So there's a bit of mystery in there. But it's my favorite scene when she's talking about her experience as a child with this demon that was haunting her, and now it's followed her into her adulthood, and now it's messing with her in her relationship with Mika. And then also the guy who's trying to help out says that yeah, it feeds off of negative energy. And so with Katie and Mika constantly arguing, this demonic presence is feeding off of that, and it's becoming more aggressive, right? As their relationship deteriorates. And that's another thing I like in the movies. We're watching this couple and their relationship just fall apart. Because in the beginning, you can see that they really love each other. And, she screams over a tarantula. He's like, oh, hey, little friend, how you doing? And he puts it outside and he's acting like a goofball. And it's cute. And I guess that's why she likes him. But then as everything escalates, it's like you can feel the tension because there's this demonic presence that's torturing her. And then they're both aware of this. And Mika, it's like, okay, in real life, one criticism with this movie I could say in real life, somebody would be like, holy crap, man, like the door moved on its own, you got dragged across the floor. What's going on? And Mika doesn't freak out like that. He looks at it as a joke, like, oh, the door moved. Okay. So it's kind of, I guess, unrealistic. Someone wouldn't really respond like that. But I like the dynamics there where it's like you got Katie who's absolutely terrified. You got Mika who's looking at it as a joke and it's like super cool. Like that's his perspective of the whole situation is that this is super cool. This has never happened to me before. I've never experienced this. Ooh, this is like real life ghost hunters in my life. It's super cool. So he's like, I'm gonna document it. So it makes sense as to why he's filming everything. And then yeah, you got the bed shots of going hours on end. But I thought it was very interesting because it's like I've never seen a movie that does that. In my opinion, I've never seen a movie to where you watch it and it focuses on what happens when you sleep. Like there could be a lot of things that are going on while you're sleeping. Like the creepiest scene to me in Paranormal Activity, first movie, is when Katie gets up and she's just standing there hovering over Mika for hours, just watching him. And then she disappears and he has to go and find her. I love those scenes. And yeah, it's very slow. And it's just like, it has a really good creepy factor to it. But my favorite scene in the whole movie is after you learn the information about Katie's past and like all that stuff. You fast forward to a scene where, yeah, you got the powder, and you may think it's stupid or whatever and it's dumb, but even Katie is like, yeah, this is stupid, you shouldn't be doing this. But Mika's like, I'm gonna prove to you that there is no whatever. I don't know what he's doing, but he's doing that. And you go to the attic. They go to the closet, and there's this little hole that's opened to get into the attic. And at that moment, the tension is building because you see the footprints, and they look really weird, like they're an animal, like footprints you've never seen before. And then they follow him, and then they're in the attic, and then he goes in there. Now, this is where I clap for the movie and I give it its kudos because they didn't do a jump scare. And that's another thing I'll praise about this movie is that there are no jump scares in this movie. If you're tired of jump scares, Paranormal Activity, the first movie does not have jump scares. And what are jump scares? That's a jump scare. But this movie has none of that. You just have long, focused shots on the characters and what's happening and their situation, and payoff is beautiful. If there is a scare, it's not a false scare, which is great. Um, but then you have my favorite scene. He goes into the attic and there's nothing there. You expect it to be like, Quarantine or the Wreck movie when there's a little creature that comes and swats the camera. But no, that doesn't happen. It's just a simple thing. There's a photograph. There's a photograph over there and some like cotton, and then he pulls it out and then he gives it to Katie, and then Katie looks at it, and then her reaction is priceless. It's so emotional because it's like she looks at this picture and it's burnt, and you learn the history about where this picture came from and the history with Katie dealing with this demon. And then once she gets that picture and she reacts to it, that's when I'm like, shit has hit the fan. And that is my favorite scene in the movie. And I love Parent Activity. The ending, the theatrical ending, it sucks. It's absolutely garbage. It ruins the entire experience. I hate the theatrical ending to that. It's bullshit. But when they released the DVD, they released an alternate ending. And there's an alternate ending where Katie does, something to herself. And I prefer that ending because it's just a closed loop. So you have that ending. There are no sequels. So to me, the only Paranormal Activity movie is the first one. Sequels, they don't exist to me, and I prefer the alternate ending where Katie does something to herself at the end. There's also another ending that involves her and the cops, and I don't really care for that one. I like the one when she looks into the camera and does something. It's very great. Love it. Paranormal Activity, number 10 on this list. I love it. I don't care what anyone says.
There wasn't a sign of life left except I realized that I was alone with 50 or 60 of those things, just standing there, staring at me. Just wanted to crush them.
Night of the Living Dead. Now, Night of the Living Dead is also in my top 10 favorite movies, which is a different list of movies that I just love in general above everything else. And Night of the Living Dead is in that list. And it's also in this list because I just absolutely love the original Night of the Living Dead movie. The remake is garbage. Night of the Living Dead, it's a classic. It has a creepy atmosphere to it. The tone of it is really good. One thing I will say though that's a negative about the original Night of the Living Dead is the music. I think the music kind of ruins the creep factor with this movie, especially at the beginning. I mean, there are some musical scores in here that are perfectly executed, that are really well done. Like the scene where Ben is lighting a sofa or a couch or some chair on fire, and he throws it outside, and they play this really dramatic, heavy drum music. It's fantastic. But at the beginning, when Barbara's brother's being attacked, it's kind of like it's music built for that time, but it's like when you listen to it now, it kind of throws me out of the movie. So if people were to watch the original Night of the Living Dead, I would totally recommend watching the what is it, the 50th anniversary edition, I think. Not with the added scenes though, because the 50th anniversary edition has these added scenes and they're really stupid and they really ruin the movie. They're fucking horrible. But the music, the new music that they make for that cemetery scene is fantastic. Like it's fantastic. It's perfect. Like, watch the original Night of the Living Dead movie without all the added scenes, but with the new music. I recommend that. And I think they do have a copy of that out there. It's fantastic with the new music. But Night of the Living Dead, I love the movie. I've talked about this before, but it's like you have Barbara in here who is a mute throughout half of it. It's because she's traumatized. She just saw her brother get attacked, so she doesn't know what to do, and then she gets attacked by this black dude, and then she's stuck in his house with these random strangers. She doesn't know who they are, so she doesn't know who to trust. She just freaks out, and now she's just like just dead inside, just dead in the soul. She has no reaction. And then you got Ben, who I just recently watched this movie. You got Ben in here who seems to be the hero, right? He seems to be the hero. But some of the stuff that he says in the movie is wrong because you see the conflict between Ben and Cooper, right? And at first you look at Cooper as like, oh, this guy, he does nothing. He's lazy. He's not helping. He's just complaining. He's more of a problem than a helper, right? But then when you really look at the movie and then you see this conversation that they have, Ben and Cooper, about the basement, about the cellar, and you're thinking, okay, which way should we go? Should we stay upstairs in the living room or should we go into the cellar? And by the end of the movie, you're looking at the situation and you're like, man, I think Cooper was right. I think Cooper was right. Ben was wrong. So it's like I look at it and it's really perfect because it's like you don't know what you would do in a situation like that. You don't know what you would do if you were just thrown into that. And it's perfect because then when you see Barbara running to the house, she has nowhere else to go. She's surrounded. Then all of a sudden, this black dude shows up and he starts taking charge and he hits her. And then he like boards up the house. Like, I love that shot where they show the house all boarded up. It's like this guy's not playing around, but then it's kind of creepy because now you're stuck in the house with these people. You don't know who they are. I think the movie could have, like, if they were to remake this movie, I don't think they should. I think it's flawless the way it is. But if they were to remake this movie, they should put more of a psychological tone in it, to where you have a character in the movie who's in the house with these people who is like, just like some sort of creep, like just some person who has like a psychological disorder or some sort of mental disorder or something, to like spicing up the whole tension that's supposed to be in the house. Because I feel like, yeah, the tension is present in the movie between Cooper and Ben, and it's flushed out to a good point where it's like, yeah, the scene where Ben goes out to the truck and then they fuck that whole plan up about getting the gas, which is one of my favorite scenes. It's like really dramatic. They play good music. Cooper throws the cocktails from the window. It's really like you're into it and you're like, what's gonna happen? And then boom, shit gets fucked up. And then Cooper's like, I'm gonna go back into the cellar. And then Ben tries to get back in the house. And then like Cooper's confused about what to do. And then like he decides to help Ben. And then Ben's pissed. And then they fight. And Cooper gets his ass whooped. And this is a really good scene. And so it's like the climax to that whole moment is there. And then at the end, where you got Ben doing something to Cooper, where it's just like cold blooded, man, where he's like, I'm sick of taking Cooper's shit. He just ends him. And it's just great. And I love it. And you have that. But then you could have had more in here. I feel like it's not enough. You want to spice it up a little bit, just add a little bit more psychological elements to all of the people that are trapped and secluded in this farmhouse surrounded by zombies. But other than that, I love Night of the Living Dead. It's one of my favorite movies, one of my favorite horror movies as well. And I highly recommend the original Night of the Living Dead with the added music, but without the new scenes. No.
I see why you like this video camera so much.
You do?
It's not quite reality.
Reality says we gotta move.
No, but it's totally like a filtered reality, man. It's like you can pretend everything's not quite the way it is.
The Blair Witch Project. Yes, this movie is also added into my favorite movies of all time, just like Night of the Living Dead was. And so with The Blair Witch, it's also one of my favorite horror movies as well. And yes, like I said earlier, I'm a sucker for found footage movies, and the Blair Witch Project started that whole craze with me. Just wanting to see every single found footage movie that has been released at the time when I was obsessed with it. Now I'm like, I really don't care because it's kind of oversaturated. Like I saw Fingers Forgotten and that movie's an F. It's garbage. But you go back with the Blair Witch Project, it's like, okay, a lot of people complain and they say, well, Blair Witch isn't the first original found footage movie. It's originally um, Cannibal Holocaust. And Cannibal Holocaust is not a good movie. It's an interesting movie. You know, it's like one of those movies to where it's like you can say that you watched it. You just say, yeah, I watched Cannibal Holocaust. There, I did it. You know, and it's like that's it. Like to me, it's not really a found footage movie. I mean, the whole movie really, like I would say 95% of Cannibal Holocaust is just a regular movie, and then like the 5% of it is the found footage, you know, of showing the kids and what happened. So to me, I really don't think that counts. But anyways, Blair Witch Project, I love it. It's a fantastic movie. I love the three characters in the movie, and even though there wasn't really a script, there was an idea, an execution that the directors had. They had a vision for this, you know, because when you look at the mythology they set up, it's it's a rich mythology. Like the whole mythology, they made a little fake. Um, they made a fake doc. They made another fake documentary on the Blair Witch legend called Curse of the Blair Witch, and I would highly recommend that for first-time watchers of the Blair Witch to watch Curse of the Blair Witch to get brushed up on the history, and then watch the Blair Witch Project. Because if you watch those back to back, I feel that watching the curse will enhance a person's experience with the Blair Witch Project instead of just walking into it cold and not knowing the backstory. I mean, you don't need to do that. I still think Blair Witch holds up on its own without watching Curse. But if you watch Curse before the actual movie, I think it will enhance a viewer's experience. It certainly did for me, even though I did see Blair Witch first. Then, you know, I watched Curse. But then I remember showing a friend of mine Cursed and Blair Witch, and they hadn't seen it at either one of those movies at all. And I showed them Curse and then Blair Witch, and they were super scared. Maybe they're just the weaklings, because some people are not scared of this movie. Some people think this movie, just like Paranormal Activity, is just boring and tedious. And I can understand that. I can understand that because, yeah, there's really nothing happening here except people walking, arguing over a map.
I gave you back the map, Heather.
I gave you the map.
I gave you back the map.
I'm the map. I'm the map. I'm the map.
And that's it. You know, they're not really doing anything else. But see, that's the stuff that I like because that's real, right? Okay, where it's like back in the day, back in that time, you know, before cell phones were where we have cell phones and navigation systems. You have people who use compasses and maps to navigate their surroundings. And so with the Blair Witch, it's interesting because you got these three kids. They're just kids. They go out on this expedition to shoot a documentary for the Blair Witch, Legend of the Blair Witch. You got Mike, who's the boom mic operator. You got Josh, who's the camera operator. And you got Heather, who's the host, who's the writer and a co-director. And so they're just three kids. They're just three happy-go-lucky kids going for a camping trip. That's all it is. No big deal. I'm gonna go to Burkittsville, interview some people, and then they tell you all these creepy stories. Like my favorite story is the guy with the glasses who they meet in the shop, and he tells them the story about Rustin Parr. It's one of my favorite scenes in the movie when you just listen to the story and hear what he has to say. You know, it's like talking to one of those old men at the grocery store who's lived in that town for like since he was a little kid, and he knows all the people in the neighborhood and he knows all the stories and stuff. So it's a really good scene. I love that scene with him. And then, you know, they go into the woods and then they get lost and they're arguing, yes, but I understand it because it's like they're lost and they're upset and they don't trust Heather and they're wondering where Heather is taking them, and Heather has her own agenda of what she wants to do while she's out there. So she's just leading these guys on like just an endless parade of like, ooh, let's go look for this, let's go look for that. And one of my favorite scenes in this movie is where Josh is tearing Heather down, where he's constantly yelling at her to her face, just laying it all out on the table, all of his emotion, and then she just starts to cry. And it's not dramatic, but I would say that it's pretty emotional. It's pretty emotional due to the fact that you're immersed in this situation with these characters where it's like, I'm glad they really went out into the woods. They weren't really lost or anything, but I'm glad they shot this guerrilla style, because then it's like the characters, the actors were actually out there in the woods just camping, and a lot of their emotion actually bled into their characters. Like they had a vague idea of who their characters were and what they're all about. Like they would get notes from, the writer and directors and say, okay, here today you don't trust Mike, blah blah blah, and they would get that idea and just run with it. So there's a lot of improvisation in this, which is great. And so a lot of that emotion and anger that they had for one another was real, and I like that. It was genuine. And so, with Josh freaking out on Heather, it was great. And then Mike getting all aggressive. Then the map scene where Mike talks about, oh yeah, I kicked the map into the creek, and he keeps that secret for a long time. And then he finally tells them, and then they just freak out, and then Josh and Mike are about to fight. I love that scene because it's building a lot of tension to where you don't know who is doing what to whom. Like, why did Josh take the map and kick it into the creek? And there are many explanations for it. It could be just Mike, he got frustrated, and out of his frustration, he just kicked it into the creek. Or you could say he got possessed by the witch, and the witch made him kick the map into the creek because she controlled his mind, just like Rustin Parr. So you connect the dots. So that's what another thing I like about this movie. It's very ambiguous. Even though it is like, okay, obviously there's something supernatural out there, but you really don't know. And that's why I remember looking up information about, I think they have this on the Blu-ray of the Blair Witch Project, where they shot multiple endings. And a lot of them were like, clearly, okay, there's something supernatural because you've got Mike hanging from like a big stick figure. And I'm glad they didn't do that. I'm glad they went with the vague ending where it's just like, you got Mike in the corner. What's wrong with him? Is he possessed? Is he dead? What's going on? Then Heather just gets thumped over the back of the head because you hear a loud thud. Then she falls and drops the camera, and that's it. And I like that. And I'm glad that we didn't see anything, because to me, the point of the movie is not about seeing the witch. It's not about seeing the witch. It's about the experience with what the viewer is having watching these three kids who are just happy-go-lucky. They go into the woods and they just suffer a mental breakdown. They just mentally break down. You see Mike eating a leaf because he has no food. You see Josh and Mike freaking out on each other. Heather and Mike freaking out on each other. Then once Josh disappears, Heather starts freaking out. Like, my other favorite scene in this movie, two favorite scenes with Heather in this movie. One of the scenes is when she comes back to the same log. The same log scene. It doesn't make me cry or anything, but I think her emotional impact with that is flawless because it's real. It's like, they've been walking in circles. They don't know how they got back here. And then Mike and Josh's reaction to it is fantastic, where they're like, it's the same fucking log. And then Heather starts breaking down, and she's suffering internally, where she's like, it's the same log. It's the same log. She's just devastated. She's just confused and doesn't know how this happened. That's one of my favorite scenes with her. And another one of my favorite scenes with her, where she really freaks out, is when she finds the stick with Josh's blood in it, with like some sort of piece of skin from Josh or whatever is in there, I don't know. And then she tosses it, and then she doesn't tell Mike about it. Now she's just completely hysterical, where she's like, I gotta put my gloves in my hands. My gloves in my hands. And then it's perfect when she tries to put her backpack on, and then her hair gets caught by her bag. It's fantastic. I love it. That's why I like Blair Witch Project so much. It's like, it's just about people's emotions and how we deal with people and how we work together, and how some other people's agendas don't always align with what someone else wants to do. And then the ending, like I said, it's ambiguous. It's like, you don't know. It could be people out there. It could be Josh being possessed. Possibilities are endless. I love the Blair Witch Project. It's near and dear to my heart because I saw it when I was a kid. I love it. I'll always love it. Maybe I love it now because it's just nostalgia, but it's still, some scenes still creep me out in that movie, and I still love Blair Witch. So what more can I say?
Shut up.
We're gonna get you. Not another peep. Time to go to sleep.
The Evil Dead, the original Evil Dead, I do not care for the remake. The remake to me is like, okay, it's I give like the remake a solid C. I give it a solid C because I think that all the technical aspects of the Evil Dead remake are absolutely fantastic. They're flawless. All the technical aspects, the directing, the makeup, the special effects, all that stuff is fantastic. But then the other half of it, like with the story, its execution, acting, all that stuff is garbage, okay? So when you watch it, it's like I would watch the remake Evil Dead with the volume turned off, put it on mute, and just look at it, because when you just look at it, it's flawless. It looks great. But when you listen to it and you see and hear the actors and you see how the story, plots out, it's just bad. It's rubbish. I don't like it. Compared to the original Evil Dead, yeah, the original Evil Dead is silly as well. It's got some silly acting in it. And yeah, you can say, okay, the remake and the original are pretty much the same. I would say that, but then here's the thing. I had the privilege of seeing the original Evil Dead in the theater. And it was a fantastic experience. My first time seeing a movie in the theater, and it was great. Because it's like, okay, I remember seeing the Evil Dead, the original, when I was a kid. I was probably maybe 8 years old when I saw it. My mother showed it to me, and I was terrified. I was absolutely scared. It's a gore fest movie. There's a lot of gore in it. There's a lot of blood. There's a lot of just brutal, horrific, violent scenes in there, and it scared me. And then to right now, I'm an adult, and when I watch it now, it doesn't scare me, except a little bit towards the end. There are certain scenes that I laugh at, which I think are funny, but maybe it's just nostalgia. The movie's still close to my heart. It's still close to my heart. The execution of the original Evil Dead is a bit silly, but it's just it's a simplistic movie. It's just, you get the kids, like Friday the 13th. You got the kids, they go to the cabin for sex and drugs. You got one, guy named Ash who's just like a really shy dude. And this is one thing I love about it. That's why I look at the Evil Dead franchise now, Army of Darkness, all that stuff. I don't like the fact that it went into the funny direction. Like, Evil Dead 2 is good, and Army of Darkness is okay, and the Evil Dead, like, TV show, it's fine, but I really prefer just, like, the brutal, horrific, serious horror. I don't like it when movies start off with something serious and then they just turn into a comedy.
I said talk to me, damn it, or else I'm gonna throw you in the fire!
You stupid bitch, you filthy slut! Did you fuck with me?
No!
Get it, mini-meat.
And I just don't like that. I like the original Evil Dead because it's brutal, it's violent, it's serious, 100%, and it doesn't have any comedic stuff in there. And you can say, well, the story in there, it caters for something silly. You got teens going out in the woods to have a good time and drink, do drugs, and this demonic thing happens and all that stuff. But then I like it because all the teens, they become possessed one by one. Like, you have that infamous tree rape scene, which is unnecessary, but, hey, it's there. But I would say my favorite scene in the entire Evil Dead movie is the scene where you see Ash. It's a showdown between Ash and his girlfriend Linda, and there's a shot where she's just sitting on the floor. She has white.
We're gonna get you, not another peep. Kinda gonna sleep.
So it still creeps me. Like, the image of seeing her singing, her constantly laughing is really creepy. It's really creepy. And then, like I said, towards the end of the movie is the most creepiest stuff, because that's when shit just hits the fan, and there's just demons left and right. Here's how I look. People want to say that they're zombies, they're demons. That's how I look at it anyway, because, like, they're possessed. They're not zombies. A zombie cannot turn back into a human being. They remain a zombie forever. They may get some of their motor skills back and some of their ways of thinking as a zombie, but they don't have control over their impulses. They still want brain. But then when you have the demon, they're possessed. They're being controlled, and they can come in and out of like human form. They can go back into their possessed state, and they come back, turn to a human being, and trick you, and be like, "Oh, I'm fine, Ashley," and all that stuff, and it's great. So I loved all of that stuff, and like I said, towards the end of this movie, it's really good, where you have just splatter fest, there's blood flying everywhere, and you got Ash getting all messed up, and then it's a good arc for the Ash character, because you see him, he starts off, and he's just like this really timid, weak person. He's not really like, he doesn't have any strength. He's not strong internally or externally or anything. It's like he gets hit in the face, and then he falls into this shelf and he gets stuck. And then there's another scene where his friend, is like, "Okay, Ash, you have the axe and I'll kill this demon." But then Ash is this little coward. He's cowering in the corner. And then his friend's like, "Give me the axe." And he starts cutting up the demon. And then by the end, he finally builds the courage to be like, "Okay, I'll fight these demons." He's still a bit weak, but he's like, "I got no choice now. I got to do what I have to do." Especially seeing his girlfriend, he's about to shoot her. All that stuff is great. And so him crying over Linda is justified, where he's like, "Linda, Linda, Linda," all that stuff. And by the end of the movie, I also like the thing what they do with the camera, where it's like the main demon, I guess, like the ending. Evil Dead, fantastic. I love that ending. To me, the first Evil Dead is the only one that exists. Because to me, at the end of the Evil Dead movie, that was it. It was a wrap. That's what I think the intention was. Is like, yeah, it's a one and done, closed loop. It's all over, right? I don't care about, like, the sequels are fine. They're fine. They don't suck. I just really don't like the fact that it went in the comedy direction. So to me, the only Evil Dead that exists, the first one, it's not really that scary, but except towards the end a little bit, when just balls to the walls, like demons everywhere, blood splattering all over the place, is great. But I would say that if you watch the Evil Dead, it's just fun, and it's very entertaining. It's a very entertaining movie. Evil Dead, it's fantastic. That's why it's on this list.
I know I've seen your face somewhere. What do you do? Vampire killer. Say what? Vampire killer. Come on, man. What do you do?
What is the matter with you, friend? Are you hard of hearing? I kill vampires.
How'd she do that?
Special makeup.
Oh.